The encrypted email arrived at 2:17 a.m. No subject line, no sender address, just a single video file. I opened it, expecting a security alert or spam. Instead, the screen filled with the interior of a garage engulfed in flames. My 7-year-old son, Evan, was screaming my name. But the camera didn't shake. The person filming wasn't panicking. They were zooming in. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. My cabin was 3 hours from the nearest paved road. I bought it to escape the noise of the world, to forget the things I did as a Delta sniper, and to bury the guilt of leaving my family behind. But silence is fragile. I watched the video 3 times before my heart started beating again. In the footage, the fire spread unnaturally fast, licking up the walls of the garage where I used to teach Evan how to fix bicycles. The smoke was thick, black, and oily, accelerant. "Daddy, Daddy, help." Evan's voice cracked through the speakers, high and terrified. He was banging on the small window, his face smeared with soot. Any normal father would have collapsed. Any normal man would have thrown the laptop against the wall and screamed until his throat bled. But I did not scream. My training took over. The part of me that I thought was dead, the operator, the hunter, woke up instantly. I forced my hand to stop trembling and paused the video at the 0:14 mark. I stared at the edge of the frame. The camera was steady. Too steady. Someone was holding it with both hands, framing the shot to capture Evan's terror perfectly. They were not trying to save him. They were not even trying to put out the fire. Then I heard it. I plugged in my tactical headset and cranked the audio gain up to maximum. Beneath the roar of the flames and Evan's cries, there was a whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but my ears knew how to separate signal from noise. Hold the angle. Make it look tragic. It was a man's voice. Calm. Professional. I closed the laptop. I did not pack clothes. I packed gear. The drive back to the city usually took 6 hours. I made it in 4. The entire time, my hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I thought about Natalie. When we divorced, she told me she needed someone safe. Someone who didn't disappear for months on a classified deployment. She wanted a normal life for Evan. So she married Victor. Victor was a real estate developer. Wealthy. Charming. He wore Italian suits and smiled with too many teeth. He was safe. He was stable. And now, my son was dead in his garage. I parked my truck 3 blocks away from the house I used to own. It was dark, the streetlights humming overhead. I pulled my hood up and moved through the shadows. I didn't want to be seen. Not yet. The house looked like a crime scene, but the police tape was already gone. That was fast. Too fast. A fatal fire usually keeps a scene locked down for days. I climbed the neighbor's oak tree, a vantage point I had used years ago to check the roof for leaks. From here, I had a direct line of sight into the living room window. They were there. Natalie was sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, like she had been hollowed out from the inside. She wasn't moving. Victor was pacing. He held a tumbler of whiskey in one hand and his phone in the other. He wasn't mourning. He was working. I raised my compact binoculars and focused on his face. He looked annoyed. He gestured at Natalie, saying something sharp. She flinched. It was a small movement, barely a twitch of her shoulder, but I saw it. She was terrified of him. I shifted my gaze back to Victor. He took a sip of whiskey and unlocked his phone. He swiped through something, then stopped. He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a satisfied smile. The kind of smile a man wears when a business deal closes exactly how he planned. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the encryption program I ran on the email. It had finished tracing the metadata of the video file. I looked at the screen. The video hadn't been sent from a burner phone or an anonymous server in Russia. It had been uploaded from a device named Victor_admin_cloud. He sent it to himself. He saved it. And somehow, someone, maybe a hacker, maybe a ghost, had forwarded it to me. I looked back through the window. Victor walked over to Natalie and placed a hand on her shoulder. To an outsider, it looked comforting. Through my binoculars, I saw his fingers dig into her collarbone. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Natalie closed her eyes, tears leaking out, but she nodded. She was obeying him. I lowered the binoculars. The grief finally hit me, sharp and cold, but I pushed it down into the pit of my stomach. I would mourn Evan later. I would cry for my boy when the work was done. Right now, there was a target in that living room. I reached into my bag and pulled out a parabolic microphone. I needed to hear what they were saying. I aimed the dish at the window glass, hoping the vibrations would carry their voices. Static hissed in my ear, then cleared. Insurance adjuster is coming tomorrow at 9. Victor's voice came through, tinny but clear. You need to pull it together, Nat. If you mess this up, we lose everything. He was my baby, Natalie sobbed. Her voice sounded broken, jagged. He was an asset, Victor snapped. And now he's gone. Do not ruin the payout, or I swear to God, the next fire won't be an accident. I froze. The next fire. I recorded the audio snippet and saved it. My finger hovered over the trigger of my rifle, but I didn't fire. A bullet was too easy. A bullet would be mercy. Victor didn't deserve mercy. He deserved to be dismantled, piece by piece. I watched him walk to the window and look out into the darkness. He looked right at the tree where I was hiding, but he couldn't see me. Men like Victor didn't believe in monsters in the dark. They didn't know the Reaper was already on their lawn. I packed my gear silently. I needed a base of operations. I needed intel. And I needed to know exactly how he burned my son alive without getting caught. As I climbed down, I checked the email one last time. I wanted to see the timestamp again. And that was when I saw it. A detail I missed the first time because of the shock. At the very end of the video, for a split second before the file cut to black, the camera panned down to the floor. There was a shoe visible near the fire. A high-end, polished dress shoe. But there was no soot on it. The shoe was clean. I realized then that the fire in the video wasn't uncontrolled. It was contained. My son wasn't just murdered. He was part of a set. The funeral was held on a Tuesday morning under a sky that looked like bruised iron. I didn't wear a black suit. I didn't stand by the grave to throw a handful of dirt onto the casket that supposedly held my son's ashes. Instead, I lay prone on the flat roof of a maintenance shed 400 yards away, peering through a Leupold Mark IV spotting scope. The rain had started to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the roof tiles, but I didn't move. My body temperature dropped, my breathing slowed, and I became part of the architecture. This wasn't a funeral. It was a press conference. Victor had arranged for a media perimeter. I counted 3 news vans parked outside the cemetery gates. Cameras with telephoto lenses were perched like vultures, waiting for the grieving family shot. A black limousine pulled up to the gravesite. The driver opened the door, and Victor stepped out. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck. He paused for a fraction of a second, adjusting his cufflinks, ensuring the light hit him just right before he turned back to help Natalie. Natalie didn't step out. She was pulled out. Through the scope, I studied her face. Her skin was the color of old paper. Her eyes were swollen shut, hidden behind dark sunglasses. She walked with a stumble, her legs heavy, as if gravity was pulling harder on her than on anyone else. Victor wrapped an arm around her waist. To the cameras clicking away in the distance, it looked like a supportive embrace. But I saw his hand. I zoomed in until the image of his fingers filled my vision. He wasn't holding her up. He was gripping her hip bone so hard his knuckles were white. He was steering her. Every time she sagged, his fingers dug in deeper, forcing her spine straight. It was a control hold. I had used similar techniques to march prisoners of war to extraction points. Smile for the cameras, Nat. I whispered to myself, reading his body language. The service began. The priest spoke about innocence and angels, his voice carrying over the wind. I didn't listen to the words. I was scanning the perimeter, building a threat matrix. Most of the attendees were strangers to me, business associates of Victor's, men in expensive coats checking their watches. Women who looked more concerned with their makeup running in the rain than the death of a 7-year-old boy. Then I saw him. Standing near the back, away from the main group, was a man in a police uniform. He wasn't a beat cop. Gold oak leaves on his collar. Chief of Police, Raymond. I knew him. 10 years ago, he was a patrol sergeant I'd bought a beer for once. Now, he was standing at a private funeral for an accidental fire victim. Why was the chief of police here? As the service ended, people began to disperse. Victor shook hands, nodding solemnly, accepting condolences like he was accepting awards. He moved toward Chief Raymond. I adjusted the focus wheel. They didn't shake hands like old friends. The handshake was quick, firm, and, most importantly, heavy. Victor passed something to the chief. It was small, white. An envelope? A drive? It disappeared into Raymond's raincoat pocket in less than a second. Raymond nodded once, touched the brim of his hat, and walked away without looking back. My stomach churned with a cold, hard rage. That wasn't a condolence. That was a transaction. I stayed on the roof for another hour, long after the limo had driven away and the gravediggers had finished burying the empty box. I waited until the cemetery was silent. Then, I packed my scope and climbed down. I didn't go to the grave. I couldn't. If I stood over that fresh dirt, the soldier in me would die, and the grieving father would take over. And the father couldn't do what needed to be done next. The father would collapse. The soldier needed to work. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of the city, a place with flickering neon signs and cash-only policies. I set up my laptop on the stained desk and connected to the dark web via a routed server. I needed to know why the police investigation had ended before it even started. I logged into a secure messaging board I hadn't used since my discharge. I typed a single message to a user handle, ghost_actual. Need eyes on case #4922. B. City PD. Status and officer on record. I waited. The rain hammered against the motel window. I cleaned my sidearm, a SIG P226, disassembling and reassembling it blindly. The mechanical click-clack of the steel slide was the only thing keeping me grounded. 20 minutes later, the screen blinked. Ghost_actual was Blake. He was former intelligence, the kind of guy who could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who manufactured the steel for the needle. A file transfer appeared. I opened it. It was a scan of the police report for the fire. I scrolled to the bottom, my eyes scanning the official conclusion. Cause of fire: accidental electrical failure. Wiring fault in garage subpanel. Case status: closed. Evidence: destroyed. Autopsy: inconclusive due to thermal damage. Remains released to next of kin. Closed. The fire happened 48 hours ago. A fatal fire investigation takes weeks. Forensics, accelerant sniffing dogs, electrical engineers. It takes time to rule out arson. But this file had been signed, sealed, and closed in less than a day. And the signature at the bottom of the report wasn't the fire marshal's. It was countersigned by Chief Raymond. My phone vibrated on the desk. A text message from an unknown number. It was Blake. Don't dig into this, Adrian. The order to close the file didn't come from the precinct. It came from the mayor's office. They wiped the server logs an hour ago. If I hadn't grabbed this screenshot, it wouldn't exist. I stared at the glowing screen. Victor didn't just have the police in his pocket. He had the city. He had erased my son's murder with a pen stroke and a check. I stood up and walked to the window, peering out through the blinds at the wet parking lot. I thought about the envelope Victor handed to the chief. I thought about the clean shoe in the video. They thought they had buried the truth. They thought the paperwork was the end of it. But they forgot one thing. Paperwork doesn't stop a bullet. I grabbed a marker and taped the photo of Victor from the funeral, the one I'd snapped through the scope, onto the motel mirror. I drew a red circle around his smiling face. Then I drew a question mark next to it. Why? Why go to these lengths? Why stage a fake fire? Why bribe the chief of police? If he just wanted to kill Evan to hurt Natalie, there were easier ways. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a business move. And I was going to audit the books. The money trail is always the loudest witness in the room. You just have to know how to listen to it. I spent the next 48 hours existing on black coffee and rage. While Victor was likely playing the grieving stepfather at charity luncheons, I was peeling back the layers of his financial life. It wasn't hard. Men like Victor think they are untouchable, so they get lazy. They use their real names on offshore accounts. They use the same passwords for their emails as they do for their security gates. I sat in the motel room, the glow of the laptop illuminating the cheap peeling wallpaper. I had bypassed his firewall using a brute force decryption tool Blake had sent me years ago. It was illegal, highly traceable if you weren't careful, and exactly the kind of thing that would send me to federal prison. I didn't care. I was inside Victor's private cloud storage. I sifted through folders named tax shelter, properties, and renovations. Boring. Mundane. Then I found a folder buried inside a subdirectory of a shell company called Apex Holdings. The folder was named E. Asset Liquidation. My heart hammered against my ribs. Evan. I opened it. There were PDF documents inside. Scans of insurance policies. I clicked on the first one. It was a jumping juvenile whole life insurance policy, the kind wealthy parents buy for their kids as an investment. But the coverage amount wasn't normal. $2 million. And the date of the policy modification? 3 weeks ago. I scrolled down to the beneficiaries section. It wasn't Natalie. It was Victor Vance, trustee. I felt sick. The kind of nausea that comes from realizing evil isn't always a monster with claws. Sometimes it's a signature on a dotted line. He had bet against my son's life. He had finalized the payout amount before the accident even happened. But insurance fraud is common. It's dirty, but it's common. What I found next wasn't. In the same folder, there was an email thread with a man named Julian. The subject line was Legalities of Absence. I opened the thread and read the latest email from Julian. Victor, the policy requires a death certificate within 30 days to expedite the claim. If the body is too damaged for DNA, we need the fire marshal's affidavit immediately. Do not let the investigation drag on. If they classify it as a missing person instead of a confirmed casualty, the payout freezes for 7 years. Make sure the remains are accepted by the coroner. Remains. The word floated on the screen like a ghost. Julian knew. He knew the body in the garage, whatever it was just a prop to satisfy the paperwork. He was coaching Victor on how to navigate the legal definition of death. I looked up Julian. Julian Thorne, a high-end defense attorney with an office in the financial district and a reputation for making problems disappear. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was the architect. I needed to get closer. Digital recon was done. It was time for boots on the ground. I waited until nightfall. I drove to Victor's office building downtown. It was a glass tower that screamed arrogance. Victor's company, Vance Development, took up the top 3 floors. Security was tight, but predictable. Keycard access, rotating guards, cameras on the elevators. Standard corporate defense. I didn't go through the front door. I went through the service entrance in the loading dock, wearing a generic gray jumpsuit and carrying a toolbox. I walked with purpose, head down, looking annoyed. People never stop a workman who looks like he's late for a job. I rode the freight elevator to the 30th floor. The hallway was empty, the carpets plush enough to silence my boots. I picked the lock on Victor's office door in 12 seconds. The office smelled of leather and expensive cologne. It was dark, lit only by the city lights outside. I moved to his desk. I wasn't looking for files on the computer anymore. I was looking for the physical trash. The things people forget to delete because they hold them in their hands. I rifled through the drawers. Nothing. I checked the shredder bin. Empty. Then I checked the jacket pocket of the suit hanging on the coat rack. He had left a blazer here, probably a spare. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper in the inside pocket. I pulled it out. It was a crumpled receipt. Carbon paper, yellow. The kind you get from businesses that don't want a digital footprint. Date: October 14th, 2 days before the fire. Vendor: Cinematic VFX Solutions. Item: 1x silicon prop, custom mold flammable gel. Notes, paid cash. I stared at the receipt. Silicon prop. Custom mold. My knees felt weak. I had to lean against the mahogany desk to stay upright. They didn't just burn the garage. They burned a mannequin. A custom-made dummy designed to look like a child in the smoke. Evan wasn't in that fire. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The relief was instantly replaced by a new, colder terror. If Evan wasn't in the fire, where was he? You don't fake a death to keep the kid. You fake a death to get rid of him. I pocketed the receipt. This was the first piece of solid evidence that the murder was a hoax. But I couldn't go to the police. Chief Raymond would just burn this receipt and put a bullet in my back. I needed to find out where they put him. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. Footsteps. Heavy. Not security. I slipped into the shadows behind the heavy curtains, pressing myself against the cold glass of the window. The office door opened. Victor walked in. He wasn't alone. I don't care about the risk, Julian, Victor said. His voice was agitated. He slammed a briefcase onto the desk, inches from where I had just been standing. It's not about risk, Victor, a smoother voice replied. Julian, it's about maintenance. The facility called. The boy is acting out. He's asking for his mother. If he keeps making noise, the staff will have to sedate him again. Sedation is expensive. Then pay them, Victor hissed. I just got the insurance approval today. Money isn't the problem. Silence is. He can't stay there forever, Julian warned. Eventually, someone will ask questions. A boarding school for troubled youth creates a paper trail. He's not at a school. Victor laughed, a cruel, dry sound. He's in the vault. As long as he breathes, I have leverage over Natalie. And as long as he's dead to the world, I have my 2 million. I gripped the handle of my knife in the dark. The vault. I didn't know where that was yet. But I knew one thing. My son was alive. And the men in this room were talking about him like he was a piece of inventory. I watched through the slit in the curtains as Victor poured 2 drinks. He looked relaxed. He looked victorious. Enjoy the drink, Victor. It's going to be your last peaceful moment. Because now I know he's breathing. And as long as he's breathing, there is no army on earth that can stop me from getting to him. I waited in the shadows of the heavy velvet curtains for 20 minutes after Victor and Julian left the office. I didn't move until the motion sensor lights in the hallway timed out and plunged the floor into darkness. My muscles were tight, coiled like springs. I had the receipt in my pocket, the proof of the fake body, but the conversation I had just overheard was far more dangerous. The vault. It wasn't a bank. Victor wasn't the type to stash a human being in a safety deposit box. The vault was code. It was a location. A place secure enough to hide a 7-year-old boy indefinitely, yet accessible enough for Victor to control. I needed to know where it was. And there was only one person who might know. Natalie. I slipped out of the building the same way I came in, blending into the night. I drove to the house, the one Victor had bought for them. It was a sprawling modern mansion on the cliffs, all glass and sharp angles. It looked like a fortress. I didn't try to get inside this time. The perimeter security was upgraded. I saw new infrared cameras scanning the lawn. Instead, I retrieved the parabolic microphone from my truck. It was primitive compared to the digital bugs I preferred, but it was passive. It didn't emit a signal that a sweeper could detect. I set up position in the dense brush on the hillside for 100 yards out. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and cold. Sound would carry well tonight. I aimed the dish at the master bedroom balcony. The glass doors were cracked open just an inch. Victor probably liked the fresh air. For an hour, there was nothing but the sound of the ocean crashing against the rocks below. Then, movement. Natalie walked out onto the balcony. She was wearing a silk robe, wrapping it tight around herself as if she were freezing. She wasn't smoking, she wasn't drinking. She was just standing there, gripping the railing, staring out into the black water. A moment later, Victor stepped out behind her. I adjusted the gain on the mic. Come inside, Nat, Victor said. His voice was low, smooth. You'll catch a cold. I don't care, she whispered. The mic picked up the tremor in her voice. I want to see him, Victor. You promised. I promised you he would be safe. Victor corrected her, stepping closer. He didn't touch her. He stood right behind her, looming like a shadow. I didn't promise visitation rights. This isn't a divorce settlement, darling. This is a hostage negotiation. You just happen to be sleeping with the hostage taker. I gritted my teeth. The urge to put a bullet through his skull right then and there was overwhelming. At this distance, with the wind low, I could make the shot. I could end him. But if I killed him now, the location of the vault would die with him. And Julian would scrub the facility before I could find it. He's 7, Natalie sobbed, finally turning to face him. He's confused. He thinks his father abandoned him. He thinks I abandoned him. How much longer, Victor? Until the money clears and the audit is finished, Victor said casually, inspecting his fingernails. 6 months. Maybe a year. A year. Natalie's voice rose to a shriek. You said a month. Victor moved fast. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he had pinned Natalie against the balcony railing. His hand wasn't on her throat. That would leave bruises. It was gripping her jaw, forcing her to look at him. Lower your voice, he hissed. The charm was gone. The monster was out. Do you want to be a widow again? Or do you want to be a childless mother? Because if you make a scene, if you go to the police, if you even think about calling Adrian, the accident becomes real. Do you understand me? Natalie whimpered. She nodded frantically against his grip. Good, Victor said, releasing her. He smoothed down the lapel of her robe, a sick, possessive gesture. Now come to bed. We have a charity gala tomorrow. You need to look rested. He turned and walked back inside. Natalie stayed on the balcony for another minute. She wiped her face, her body shaking. She looked out at the ocean one last time, and I saw her lips move. The mic didn't pick it up, but I'm a sniper. I can read lips from a mile away. I'm sorry, Adrian. She knew. She knew I would come looking. She knew I would suspect. But she was paralyzed by fear. Victor had weaponized her love for Evan against her. He had convinced her that silence was the only thing keeping our son alive. She wasn't an accomplice. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. I lowered the microphone. My assessment had changed. I couldn't use Natalie as an asset yet. She was too unstable, too terrified. If I approached her now, she might panic and tell Victor, thinking it would save Evan. I couldn't risk that. I had to find the location myself. I packed up the gear and headed back to the truck. As I drove away, my mind raced through the conversation. The vault. 6 months. Audit. And then, a memory clicked. Back in the office, Julian had mentioned a facility. He said, the staff will have to sedate him again. Staff implies a payroll. A payroll implies a company. I pulled over to the side of the road and grabbed my laptop. I went back into the stolen files from Victor's cloud. I searched for payroll records. Nothing under Vance Development. Nothing under Apex Holdings. But then I checked the recurring payments from his personal account. There was a monthly wire transfer of $15,000 going to a shell corporation called Bright Horizon Solutions. I ran a search on the company name. It was registered as a nonprofit, a residential behavioral health center for troubled youth. Location, 40 miles north, in the middle of the state forest. Isolated, private, secure. It wasn't a school. It was a prison for kids whose parents wanted them forgotten. I looked at the map. The facility was surrounded by dense, refined woodland. No street view. No neighbors. Perfect for hiding a boy who was supposed to be dead. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, sounding like a growl in the quiet night. Hang on, Evan, I said to the empty cab. Daddy's coming. But just as I put the truck in gear, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Natalie's number. I froze. Had she seen me? Did she know I was watching? I opened the message. It wasn't a text. It was an audio file. I played it. It was a recording of Evan. His voice was tiny, groggy, like he was drugged. Mommy? The bad man said. He said I'm in the basement. It's cold. There are no windows. The message ended. Then a text followed, but it wasn't from Natalie. I know you're listening, Adrian. If you come near the house again, I won't send a recording next time. I'll send a finger. Victor knew. He wasn't just hiding. He was hunting me back. I sat in the truck, staring at the glowing screen of my phone. Victor's threat pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat. He knew I was out there. He knew I was watching. But he didn't know where I was right now, or he would have already sent men. That meant he was guessing, testing, baiting me into making a mistake. I turned off the phone and removed the battery. If he had access to Natalie's device, he could triangulate signals. I wasn't giving him that advantage. I drove north, staying off the main highways, using back roads that wound through farmland and forgotten towns. The further I got from the city, the quieter the world became. No streetlights, no traffic, just darkness and the hum of the engine. By the time I reached the edge of the state forest, dawn was breaking. The sky was pale gray, streaked with orange, and the air smelled like wet pine and earth. I parked the truck a mile from the coordinates I had pulled for Bright Horizon Solutions. I changed into dark tactical clothing, strapped on a chest rig with extra magazines, and slung a suppressed 416 Hong Kong dollars across my back. This wasn't a rescue mission yet. This was reconnaissance. I needed to confirm Evan was inside before I made my move. The facility sat at the end of a gravel access road, hidden behind a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. There was a guardhouse at the entrance, unmanned at this hour. Beyond the gate, a two-story cement block building loomed like a bunker. No windows on the ground floor. Small, reinforced glass slits on the second. It looked less like a school and more like a holding pen. I circled the perimeter through the tree-line, moving silently, scanning for cameras and motion sensors. There were 4 cameras mounted on the corners of the building, but they were fixed-position models. Cheap. Predictable. I stayed in their blind spots. At the rear of the building, there was a delivery entrance. A steel door with a keypad lock. I crouched in the brush and watched. At 0700 hours, a van pulled up. White, unmarked. The driver got out, a heavy-set man in scrubs. He punched in a code on the keypad, 4-7-2-9. The door buzzed and clicked open. He hauled out boxes of supplies. Food. Medical gear. He made 3 trips, propping the door open with a wedge. On his 4th trip, I moved. I slipped inside while his back was turned, pressing myself flat against the interior wall. The hallway was sterile, fluorescent lit, smelling of bleach and stale air. I heard voices echoing from somewhere deeper in the building. I moved down the corridor, weapon raised, eyes scanning every doorway. Most of the rooms were empty. Cots with thin mattresses, metal lockers, no personal items. This place stripped identity. Then I heard it. A child crying. My pulse spiked. I followed the sound to a stairwell leading down. The basement. The place Evan had mentioned in the recording. I descended slowly, each step deliberate. The air grew colder. The walls were unpainted concrete, damp with condensation. At the bottom, there was a heavy door with a small observation window. I peered through. Inside was a row of small cells, each with a cot and a toilet. In the farthest one, a boy sat hunched on the floor, knees pulled to his chest. It was Evan. His hair was longer, unkempt. His clothes were too big, hanging off his thin frame. But it was him. Relief and fury collided in my chest, like a grenade going off. He was alive. He was here. But I couldn't just kick the door down. There were staff upstairs. Cameras I hadn't mapped yet. If I moved too fast, they would lock the building down, or worse, hurt him to slow me down. I forced myself to retreat back up the stairs. I had what I needed, confirmation. Now I needed a plan. I exited the building the same way I came in, slipping back into the forest before the delivery driver finished unloading. Back at the truck, I pulled out a tactical notebook and sketched the facility layout from memory. I marked guard rotations, camera angles, entry points, and the location of Evan's cell. But I couldn't do this alone. Not if I wanted Evan to walk out of there alive. I reassembled my phone and made a single encrypted call. Blake answered on the second ring. "I need an exfiltration," I said. No greeting. No preamble. "Where?" Blake's voice was calm, professional. He didn't ask why. Bright Horizon Solutions. North State Forest. Target is a 7-year-old boy. Hostage situation. Private security. Unknown number of hostiles. There was a pause. You're talking about your son, Blake said quietly. Yes. Another pause. I'll need 12 hours to gather a team. You have 6, I said. And Blake, this stays off the books. No LEO involvement. If the police get a call, the boy disappears. Understood. I'll text coordinates for the rally point. The line went dead. I leaned back against the truck, exhaling for the first time in hours. I wasn't alone anymore. Blake was solid. If anyone could pull off a clean extraction, it was him. But 6 hours was a long time. Anything could happen. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photograph. The image showed Evan's cell from a different angle, higher up, like a security feed screenshot. Evan was still sitting on the floor. But now, standing in the doorframe behind him, was a man in a black jacket. He was holding a syringe. The text below the image read, "Tick-tock, Adrian. Every hour you waste, he gets another dose. How long do you think a child's heart can take sedatives before it just stops?" My blood turned to ice. Victor wasn't just threatening me. He was threatening to kill Evan slowly, medically, in a way that would look like an overdose. An accident. I looked at the timestamp on the photo. It was taken 4 minutes ago. They were watching me in real time. They knew I had found the facility. I started the engine. 6 hours was too long. I was going in now. I didn't drive through the front gate. That's what a desperate father would do. That's what they wanted me to do. A frontal assault on a fortified position with a hostage inside is a suicide pact. It ends with the hostage dead and the shooter bleeding out in the driveway. Instead, I drove the truck into the dense brush 300 yards east of the perimeter, wedging the accelerator down with my tactical knife. I pointed it straight at the fence, slapped the gear shift into drive, and rolled out the door before it picked up speed. I hit the ground rolling, blending into the undergrowth. 10 seconds later, the truck smashed through the chain-link fence, careening across the lawn before slamming into a generator shed. The crash sounded like a bomb going off. The horn stuck, blaring a long, continuous scream into the morning air. Chaos erupted. Floodlights snapped on. Doors flew open. 4 armed men in tactical black poured out of the main building, sprinting toward the crash site, weapons raised. They were shouting, distracted, their eyes fixed on the smoking wreck of my truck. Perfect. While they were suppressing an empty vehicle, I moved to the rear delivery door. I already had the code from the driver, 4-7-2-9. I punched it in. The lock clicked. I slipped inside, the silence of the hallway swallowing me whole. I didn't run. Running makes noise. I moved fast and low, my boots rolling heel to toe on the linoleum. I headed straight for the stairwell. The image of the syringe was burned into my retinas. Tick-tock. I reached the basement door. It was unlocked. That felt wrong. Security doors are designed to fail secure, meaning they lock when power is cut or alarms are triggered. This one was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with the barrel of my rifle, sweeping the room. The basement was exactly as I had seen it. Damp, cold, smelling of mold. I moved toward the cell at the end of the row. The one where I had seen Evan. "Evan," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. No answer. I reached the bars. The cell was empty. The cot was stripped. The bucket was gone. In the center of the room, sitting on a wooden chair, was a large flat-screen monitor hooked up to a battery pack. On the screen, a video was playing on a loop. It was the footage of Evan huddled in the corner. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a live feed. It was a recording. The photo they sent me, the threat about the syringe, it was all a psychological operation. They knew I was watching. They knew I would come. They had moved him hours ago, maybe the moment I pinged the location on my laptop. I raised my rifle, spinning around. Click. The sound of a heavy latch engaging behind me. I looked at the stairwell door. It was closed now. A red light blinked above the frame. Magnetic lock. Then, the vents in the ceiling hissed. White gas began to pour into the room. Halon. Fire suppression gas. It sucks the oxygen out of the air to starve a flame. It works just as well on human lungs. I didn't panic. Panic burns oxygen. I held my breath and dropped to one knee, scanning the room for a weak point. The walls were concrete. The door was steel. The only other exit was a ventilation shaft near the ceiling, too small for a man. But the gas system had an intake. I spotted the service panel on the far wall. I fired 3 rounds into the hinges. The metal shrieked and twisted. I kicked the panel in, revealing the ductwork. It was tight, but it let out. I slung my rifle and jammed myself into the shaft, crawling on my elbows. The space was claustrophobic, dark, and filled with dust. My lungs were screaming for air, my vision starting to tunnel. I could hear the hum of the extraction fans ahead. I crawled until I saw a light, a grate leading to the outside, near the generator shed where my truck had crashed. I kicked the grate. It didn't budge. I drew my sidearm, pressed the muzzle against the locking mechanism, and fired. The grate clattered away into the grass. I tumbled out into the fresh air, gasping, coughing until my ribs ached. I dragged myself into the bushes just as boots crunched on the gravel nearby. Gas deployment confirmed, a voice said. Target should be unconscious in 2 minutes. The boss wants him alive for questioning. I froze. 2 men were standing 10 feet away, staring at the ventilation output. They weren't looking down at the grass. I didn't have time to recover. I needed intel. I needed to know where they took my son. I surged up from the ground, grabbing the nearest man by his vest and slamming him into the brick wall. Before his partner could raise his rifle, I pistol-whipped him across the temple. He dropped like a stone. I turned back to the first man, pinning his forearm against the wall with my knife point. "Where is the boy?" I growled, my voice raspy from the gas. The man's eyes were wide, terrified. He was just a hired gun, a private security contractor who thought this was an easy paycheck. He wasn't ready for a Delta operator who had just crawled out of a grave. "I don't know," he stammered. "They moved him. The suit. Julian, he took him." "Took him where?" I pressed the knife tip into the fabric of his vest, just enough to let him feel the steel. "The airfield," he screamed. "Private hangar. West County. They're flying him out. Victor said he's moving the asset offshore." "Offshore? If they got Evan on a plane, he was gone. International waters, non-extradition countries. I would never find him." "When does the plane leave?" "Noon. The flight plan is filed for noon." I checked my watch. 11:15 a.m. I had 45 minutes to cross 30 miles of bad road, breach an airfield, and stop a jet from taking off. I knocked the man out with a swift blow to the jaw and left him slumped next to his partner. I didn't have a vehicle. My truck was a smoking wreck. I looked at the security van parked near the entrance, the one the mercenaries had used. I sprinted for it, ignoring the burning in my lungs. The game had changed. It wasn't a rescue anymore. It was an interception. The security van was a Ford Transit, top-heavy and underpowered, but I drove it like it was a rally car. I kept the pedal pinned to the floor, weaving through traffic on the Tulane Highway, blowing through red lights, and forcing oncoming sedans onto the shoulder. 11:32 a.m. 28 minutes left. I called Blake on the hands-free system. "I need eyes on West County Airfield." I shouted over the roar of the engine. "Private hangar. Look for a flight plan filed under Apex or Vance." Keyboard keys clattered on the other end. "Got it," Blake said, his voice tight. "Flight N492VA. Citation CJ4 Jet. Filed for Nassau, Bahamas. Scheduled departure is 12 o'clock sharp." "Adrian, there's a problem." "What problem?" "The passenger manifest lists 3 souls on board. Pilot, co-pilot, and 1 passenger, Julian Thorne. No Evan listed. But the cargo manifest lists medical transport, sensitive. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until the plastic creaked. They were shipping my son as cargo. Likely sedated, stuffed in a crate or a medical pod so customs wouldn't ask questions about a crying child. "Can you ground the plane?" "Negative. It's a private strip outside FAA tower control. Uncontrolled airspace until they hit 10,000 feet. But I can jam their comms so they can't call for backup." "Do it." I'm 10 minutes out. I hung up. The airfield appeared on the horizon, a strip of asphalt cut into the cornfields. I saw the hangar. A sleek white jet was already on the tarmac, engines whining as they spooled up. A black SUV was parked next to the boarding stairs. I saw a man in a suit, Julian, walking toward the plane. He was carrying a briefcase. Two large men were loading a long, rectangular gray case into the cargo hold. That was him. That was Evan. I didn't slow down for the gate. I smashed the van through the chain-link barrier, the windshield spider-webbing on impact. The van fishtailed on the gravel, but I corrected it, aiming straight for the jet. The pilot saw me. The engines roared louder, the plane beginning to taxi. "No, you don't," I gritted out. I slammed on the brakes, slewing the van sideways to block the runway. I kicked the door open and rolled out, bringing my rifle up in one fluid motion. The security guards by the SUV drew their weapons. I didn't hesitate. I put 2 rounds into the engine block of the SUV to disable it, then shifted aim. I wasn't here to kill the grunts. I needed the plane stopped. I fired at the front landing gear of the jet. The tires blew out with a sharp pop-pop, the rubber shredding instantly. The nose of the jet dipped, scraping against the asphalt with a shower of sparks. The plane lurched to a halt. Julian froze on the tarmac, looking from the crippled plane to me. He didn't run. He just stood there, adjusting his tie, like this was an inconvenience rather than a raid. I ignored the guards. I walked straight toward Julian, my rifle leveled at his chest. "Open the case," I ordered. The guards looked at Julian for instructions. He raised a hand, signaling them to stand down. He knew a professional when he saw one. He knew they were outmatched. "You're making a mistake, Adrian," Julian said, his voice calm, almost bored. "This isn't a kidnapping. It's a medical transfer. We have the paperwork. Open the case." Julian sighed and nodded to the men. They unlatched the gray box. I stepped forward, my heart hammering in my throat. The lid lifted. It was empty. No Evan. Just foam padding and medical supplies. I stared at the empty box, the world tilting on its axis. "Where is he?" Julian smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. "Did you really think we'd keep all our assets in one basket? This flight was a decoy, Adrian. A rabbit for the hound to chase. Where is he?" I stepped closer, jamming the barrel of the rifle under Julian's chin. "He's not here," Julian whispered, his eyes gleaming. "He's with the one person you won't shoot." My phone buzzed. I pulled it out with my left hand, keeping the rifle pinned to Julian's throat. It was a live video call. From Natalie. I accepted it. The screen showed Natalie sitting in her living room. She was crying, shaking uncontrollably. "Adrian," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." The camera panned. Sitting next to her on the couch was Victor. He had one arm around her shoulders, and on his lap sat Evan. My son looked awake now, but groggy. He was clutching a toy car, looking terrified. "Hello, Adrian," Victor said smoothly into the camera. "Nice work at the airfield. Julian tells me you caused quite a mess." "Let them go, Victor," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Oh, I'm not holding them," Victor laughed. "We're a family. We're just having a quiet afternoon at home. But I did want to show you something." Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out a remote detonator. "The house is rigged, Adrian. Gas main. C4 charges on the support pillars. If you come within 1 mile of this property, or if the police show up, click." He mimicked an explosion with his hand. "Bring Julian to me," Victor ordered. "Bring the laptop with the files you stole. Come alone, unarmed. Walk through the front door, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let the boy go." The call ended. I looked at Julian. He looked smug. He thought he had won. He thought I was checkmated. "Looks like you're my ride," Julian smirked, reaching for the door handle of the SUV. I lowered my rifle. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'm your ride." I pistol whipped him so hard across the face that his glasses shattered. He crumbled to the tarmac. I wasn't going to walk into Victor's trap unarmed. I was going to walk in with the only leverage I had left. I grabbed Julian by the collar and dragged him toward the van. "Blake," I said into my headset. I need the schematics for Victor's house, specifically the gas lines. On it, Blake replied. What's the plan? I'm not going to defuse the bomb, I said, zip-tying Julian's hands to the steering wheel. I'm going to make sure Victor is the only one who burns. The drive back to the city was a blur of calculated rage. Julian was conscious in the passenger seat, bleeding from his nose, but silent. He knew better than to speak. I had the schematics of Victor's mansion displayed on the dashboard tablet, overlaid with thermal imaging data Blake was streaming in real time. The house is a fortress, Blake's voice crackled in my ear. Reinforced steel doors, shatterproof glass. But the gas main Victor mentioned? It runs directly under the living room. If he triggers that detonator, the whole hillside slides into the ocean. I know, I said, eyes scanning the road. That's why I need Natalie to play her part. Natalie is compromised, Adrian. She's terrified. Fear is a motivator, I said. Connect me to the listening device I planted in her living room. I need to talk to her without Victor knowing. That's risky. If he hears, do it. Static hissed. Then the ambient sound of the living room filled my earpiece. I could hear the TV playing cartoons, a cruel attempt at normalcy. I heard Victor pacing, the heavy thud of his shoes on the hardwood. Natalie, I whispered into my mic. I was gambling that she was wearing the Bluetooth earbud she sometimes used for audiobooks. It was a long shot. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. Don't react, I said quickly. Don't look at him. Just listen. Adrian. Her whisper was barely audible, masked by the sound of the TV. I'm coming. But I need you to be brave. Braver than you've ever been. He has a detonator, she whimpered. He's going to kill us all. No, he won't. Victor is a narcissist. He loves himself too much to die in a suicide blast. The detonator is for leverage, not use. But he will use it if he feels cornered. What do? I need you to get him to confess. On tape. Not just about the fraud, but about Evan. About the kidnapping. I'm streaming this audio directly to the district attorney's private server. We need him to say it loud and clear. He'll kill me. He's going to kill you anyway, Nat. Once he gets what he wants from me, you're a loose end. This is the only way out. Trust me. There was a long pause. Then, I heard her shift on the couch. Okay, she breathed. I cut the connection to her earbud, but kept the listening stream open. I was 5 minutes out. I parked the van at the base of the driveway, just out of sight of the cameras. I hauled Julian out. He stumbled, groaning. Walk. I ordered, shoving him toward the gate. You're my shield. I strapped a vest onto Julian. Not a bulletproof vest, but a rig rigged with a deadman switch connected to a flashbang grenade. It wouldn't kill him, but it would make him think it would. If you run, you go boom. I lied. Ring the buzzer. Julian, sweating and pale, pressed the intercom. Victor, he croaked. It's me. I have him. The gate buzzed open. We walked up the long, winding driveway. I stayed directly behind Julian, using his body to block any clear shot from the house. Inside the earpiece, I heard Natalie make her move. Why, Victor? Her voice was shaking, but louder this time. Why did you have to hurt him? We had the money. We had everything. Shut up, Natalie, Victor snapped. No, she pushed. I want to know. You burned a dummy in the garage. You locked my son in a basement for 3 weeks. You drugged him. Why? Just for the insurance. It wasn't just the insurance. Victor roared. It was the freedom. As long as that brat is around, you're tied to Adrian. You're tied to your past. I wanted a clean slate. $2 million and a life without baggage. So you kidnapped him to erase him? I kidnapped him to erase him, Victor said, and I could hear the sneer in his voice. Adrian was the target. Evan was just the bait. And now, the rat is walking right into the trap. Got it, Blake said in my ear. Clear confession. DA has it. Police tactical teams are mobilizing. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes was too long. I reached the front door. It was unlocked. Victor wanted me inside. I pushed Julian through the doorway and followed, my rifle raised. The living room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Victor stood in the center, holding Evan by the collar of his shirt with one hand and the detonator in the other. Evan saw me. His eyes went wide. "Daddy, don't move, buddy," I said softly. Victor laughed. "The prodigal sniper returns. And look, he brought my lawyer back. A bit damaged, though." "It's over, Victor," I said, stepping into the room. "The police heard everything. They're on their way." "Let them come," Victor sneered, raising the detonator thumb high. "I'll blow this cliff into the sea before they breach the gate." "No, you won't," I said, lowering my rifle slightly. "Because you're a businessman, Victor, and suicide is a bad investment. Try me." "I don't have to." I signaled Natalie with a subtle nod. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the coffee table and smashed it into the side of Victor's knee. It wasn't a lethal blow, but it was enough. Victor howled in pain, his leg buckling. His grip on Evan loosened. "Run, Evan," I screamed. Evan scrambled away, diving behind the couch. Victor snarled, raising the detonator. "You bitch." He pressed the button. Click. Nothing happened. Victor stared at the device in his hand, confused. He pressed it again. Click. Click. "Looking for this?" Blake's voice came through the house speakers. I had hacked into the Sonos system. "Signal jammer engaged, Victor. RF frequency blocked. Your toy is dead." I raised my rifle. "And so are you," I said. Victor dropped the useless remote and reached for a pistol tucked in his waistband. He never cleared the holster. I fired a single shot. Not to kill. The bullet struck his right shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the floor. He screamed, clutching his shattered arm. I moved in, kicking the gun away. I put a boot on his chest, pressing down hard. "That was for the garage," I said. Julian tried to run for the door, but I triggered the flashbang on his vest. It detonated with a deafening bang, blinding him and knocking him flat. Natalie was holding Evan, sobbing into his hair. I looked at them. They were safe. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. I looked down at Victor, who was bleeding and whimpering on his expensive rug. "You wanted to erase my family," I whispered, leaning down. "Now you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cage, remembering that you failed." I unloaded his gun and tossed it aside. The war was over. The relief lasted exactly 45 seconds. That's how long it took for the local SWAT team to breach the front doors. They didn't come in asking questions. They came in with flashlights blinding us, shields up, and rifles screaming for targets. "Drop the weapon. Hands in the air. Do it now." I didn't argue. I placed my 416 Hong Kong dollars on the floor, kicked it away, and laced my fingers behind my head. I went down to my knees slowly. I was a Delta operator. I knew the drill. If I made a sudden move, they would turn me into a colander. "Don't shoot him," Natalie screamed, clutching Evan to her chest. "He saved us." The officers didn't care. Two of them swarmed me, slamming my face into the hardwood floor. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into my wrists. Across the room, paramedics were already working on Victor. They cut open his shirt to pack the shoulder wound. He was pale, sweating, his expensive suit ruined by his own blood. But he was smiling. I watched him from the floor, my cheek pressed against the wood. Why was he smiling? I had dismantled his operation, saved the boy, and handed the police a confession on a silver platter. He was going to prison for life. Victor caught my eye. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound, and motioned for the paramedic to wait a second. "Officer," Victor wheezed, looking at the SWAT captain. "I want to press charges." "Save it for the judge, Victor," I spat. "We have the confession." Victor laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. "Oh, the kidnapping? Sure. I'll do time for that. 5 years, maybe 10 with Julian's help. White-collar prison. Tennis courts." He shifted his gaze to me, and his eyes were dead calm. "But you, Adrian, you're never seeing the light of day again." "I have immunity," I said. "Defense of a third party." "Not for this," Victor whispered. He looked at Julian, who was sitting up now, wiping soot from his face. Julian nodded, pulling a smartphone from his pocket. He tapped the screen once. "It's sent," Julian said hoarsely. What is sent? I demanded. Victor leaned up on one elbow, ignoring the protests of the medic. Did you think I picked you at random, Adrian? Did you think I married Natalie just because she was pretty? Victor sneered. I researched you. I know who you are. I know what you did in Yemen in 2014. Operation Copperhead. My blood ran cold. Copperhead was a black book mission. Off the record. Illegal. If that file was opened, it wouldn't just be a court-martial. It would be a Hague trial. I found the classified files, Victor hissed. The civilian casualties. The unauthorized strikes. The things your government buried deep. That file is sealed, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Not anymore. Victor grinned, his teeth stained red. Julian just emailed the entire unredacted dossier to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and, just for fun, the Iranian embassy. The room seemed to tilt. You're lying. Check the news in an hour, Victor said. I'm a criminal, sure. But you? You're a war criminal. And once that hits the wire, the government won't let you have custody of a goldfish, let alone a child. They'll bury you in a hole so deep, not even God will find you. The SWAT captain touched his earpiece. He listened for a moment, his face hardening. He looked down at me. The look wasn't aggression anymore. It was caution. Central just flagged his ID. The captain muttered to his lieutenant. Federal hold. Department of Defense just took jurisdiction. It was true. The system had already flagged me. Victor laid his head back on the floor, closing his eyes as the morphine kicked in. You won the battle, soldier, Victor murmured. But I just burned your whole world down. Enjoy the cage. The officers hauled me to my feet. Daddy, Evan cried out, trying to run to me. Natalie grabbed him, holding him back. She looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. She had heard what Victor said. We're criminal. Civilian casualties. Adrian, she whispered. Is it true? I looked at her. I looked at my son, who was reaching for me with small, trembling hands. I couldn't lie to them, and I couldn't explain it. The things I did to keep them safe, to keep the world sleeping at night, they were ugly. They were necessary evils. But in the light of day, in a suburban living room, they just looked like evil. I love you, Evan, I choked out. Move him, the captain ordered. They dragged me out the door. I passed Julian on the way out. He was being treated for the flashbang burns, but he looked up at me with that same arrogant smirk. I told you, Adrian, Julian whispered. The law is a weapon, and we have more ammunition. They shoved me into the back of the armored van. The heavy doors slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. I sat there, the handcuffs digging into my wrists. I had saved my son's life. But Victor was right. By saving him, I had exposed myself. The ghost was visible now, and the monsters I had fought for 20 years were coming to collect. The engine roared to life. We weren't going to the local precinct. I knew that. We were going somewhere much darker. The armored van did not stop at a precinct. It kept rolling until the city thinned out and the roads turned clean, quiet, and watched. When the doors finally opened, I was staring at a concrete building with no sign on it. No windows on the first floor, and men at the entrance who did not wear name tags. They walked me down a hallway that smelled like disinfectant and cold air. No shouting. No drama. Just process. They put me in a small room with a metal table and a camera in the corner. My cuffs came off, but the message stayed the same. You are not free. A man walked in and set a file on the table like it weighed 100 pounds. Grant. He wore a simple suit, short hair, calm face. The kind of calm that comes from dealing with people at their worst for a living. He sat down across from me. Adrian. I did not answer. He slid the file toward me. The cover page read, Operation Copperhead. You already know what Victor and Julian tried to do, Grant said. They tried to make you radioactive. I did not ask to be famous, I said. Grant nodded like he respected that. That is not the issue. The issue is that the moment those documents hit certain inboxes, certain people decided it was safer to put you in a box. I leaned forward. My son is alive. My son was kidnapped. Victor staged a burning video on camera, and used my boy like a business asset. Put him in court. Put him in prison. That is the only box that matters. Grant watched me for a long beat. You are thinking like a father. That is good. But you are also thinking like a man who still believes the system moves fast when the truth is ugly. The door opened again, and another man stepped in. Mason. He was younger than Grant, but his eyes were tired. He carried a tablet and a stack of printed photos. Mason set the tablet down and turned it toward me. We have your confession recording of Victor, thanks to Natalie. We have financial fraud. We have kidnapping. We have coercion. That part is strong. He tapped the screen. But we also have you trespassing, armed, in multiple locations. We have 2 private security contractors injured. We have evidence of you breaching a controlled facility. I did not shoot anyone who did not choose to stand in front of me, I said. Mason's jaw tightened. This is not a movie, Adrian. In court, the question is not what you meant. The question is what can be proven clean. Grant raised one finger toward Mason, then looked back at me. Here's the real problem. Victor is not just fighting to survive prison. He is fighting to poison your name so he can keep control from behind bars. And he almost succeeded. Almost, I said. Grant opened the file and flipped to a page I did not expect. A chain of emails. Timestamps. Metadata. Then a headline draft. Grant slid it closer. Victor did not leak Copperhead. My chest tightened. He said he did. Grant nodded once. He said a lot of things. Julian sent an email, yes. But the attachments were altered. The dossier was a composite. Real pages mixed with fake pages. It was designed to trigger panic and force a federal hold, which buys them time and leverage. Mason exhaled like he had been holding it in. We traced the edit signature to a device tied to Julian's office network. I stared at the papers until the words stopped swimming. Julian had not been Victor's lawyer. He had been Victor's weapon. And now the weapon had left fingerprints. Grant leaned in. You have one move that keeps you out of a dark hole. What move? Do not speak about Copperhead, Grant said. Not to the press. Not to the police. Not even to Natalie. Let the government handle that mess. Focus on Evan. Focus on Victor. Focus on what we can prosecute in open court. Mason added, and there is something else. Victor is already trying to reshape the story. He is pushing a narrative that you are unstable, violent, and dangerous to a child. My throat went tight. He does not get to touch my son again. Grant's voice softened, just slightly. Then do this clean. You want quiet revenge? You want emotional justice? You want the kind that lasts? You let Victor talk under oath. The next morning, they moved me to a courthouse entrance I had never seen before, down a hallway reserved for people the public is not supposed to watch. When I stepped into the courtroom, the air felt heavier than any battlefield. Judge Quinton sat at the bench, expression unreadable, eyes sharp. Victor sat at the defense table in a sling, polished again, face composed like the wound was just another accessory. Julian was 2 seats away, bruised, lips split, pretending dignity. Natalie sat behind the prosecution with Evan, my son, alive, small, wrapped in a sweater that hung off him. His eyes found mine, and his whole face tightened like he was holding back a sound too big for his body. I did not wave. I did not smile. I just nodded, slow, so he would feel it in his bones. I am here. I am not leaving. Mason stood. Your Honor, the state moves for full protective custody of the child and immediate detention of Victor on charges of kidnapping, fraud, coercion, and attempted murder. Victor's attorney rose. Dominic. He spoke smoothly. Your Honor, the defense argues that Adrian is the real threat. He broke into private property armed. He assaulted multiple individuals. The child is safer away from him. Judge Quinton's gaze flicked to me. Adrian, stand. I stood. My cuffs were gone, but the whole room still treated me like a weapon. Judge Quinton said, this court will not run on rumors. It will run on evidence. Mason played the audio. Victor's voice filled the courtroom, clear enough to make people shift in their seats. The words landed one by one. Dummy, basement, leverage, payout, bait. Natalie's shoulders shook silently as she listened to her own nightmare spoken out loud. Dominic tried to object. Quentin shut it down. Then Julian did something that surprised everyone. He stood up. He looked at Victor, then at the judge. Your Honor, I want to cooperate. Victor's head snapped toward him, eyes sharp with sudden fear. Julian swallowed. Victor did not act alone. Chief Preston helped close the fire file. There were payments. There were instructions. And there is a facility contract with Bright Horizon Solutions under a shell company Victor controls. I have the documents. The courtroom went dead quiet. For the first time since this started, Victor did not look untouchable. He looked cornered. Judge Quentin leaned forward. Bail is denied. Victor is remanded into custody. Evan will remain under protective supervision, pending a full hearing. Evan's hands clenched in Natalie's lap. I watched my son inhale like he was trying not to break. That is what shattered me. Not the bombs. Not the threats. Not the trap. My child trying to be brave because adults kept failing him. As Victor was led away, he twisted his head toward me. Eyes cold, mouth barely moving. He mouthed 2 words I could read without a scope. Not finished. And the worst part was, I believed him. Victor's threat hung in the air like smoke. But this time, I wasn't fighting him with bullets. I was fighting him with time. The trial lasted 4 months. It wasn't the cinematic showdown people expect. It was slow, grinding, and painfully detailed. Julian turned state's witness, dismantling Victor's empire brick by brick. Every fraudulent transaction, every bribe to the police chief, every shell company used to launder the insurance money. It was all laid out under fluorescent lights. Natalie testified for 3 days. She didn't look at Victor once. She spoke quietly about the fear, the manipulation, and the night she finally chose her son over her safety. It wasn't a perfect redemption. She would carry the guilt of her silence forever, but it was enough to break Victor's hold on her. I sat in the back row every single day. I wore a cheap suit that didn't fit my shoulders right. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. My presence was the statement. When the verdict came down, the courtroom was silent. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering. The judge sentenced Victor to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His assets were seized to pay restitution. The clean slate. He wanted cost him his freedom forever. As the marshals led him away, Victor stopped. He looked back at me. The arrogance was gone. The polished veneer had cracked, revealing the small, scared man underneath. He didn't mouth a threat this time. He just looked empty. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched him disappear through the side door, knowing I would never have to think about him again. The real work started after the gavel fell. I didn't go back to the cabin. The silence out there wasn't peaceful anymore. It was lonely. I bought a small house near the coast, a place with a big yard and bad plumbing that I could fix with my own hands. Evan came to live with me. The first few weeks were hard. He didn't want to sleep with the lights off. He flinched at loud noises. He hoarded food in his room, hiding granola bars under his pillow like he thought he might starve. I didn't push him. I didn't try to fix him like a broken rifle. I just stayed. I cooked breakfast every morning. I sat on the porch while he played in the yard, always keeping him in my sight line, but never hovering. I let him see that I wasn't going anywhere. Natalie visited on weekends. We were polite, distant but civil. We weren't a family anymore, not really, but we were allies in keeping Evan safe. She was healing in her own way, learning to forgive herself for the blindness that almost cost us everything. One evening, 6 months later, I was down at the dock, teaching Evan how to cast a fishing line. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. Evan struggled with the reel, the line tangling in a bird's nest of knots. He got frustrated, his shoulders hiking up, tears pricking his eyes. "It's okay," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "Patience is the weapon, bud. Panic is the enemy." "I can't do it," he whispered. "I'm not like you, Dad. I'm not strong." I stopped. I turned him to face me, gripping his small shoulders. "Look at me," I said, my voice firm. You survived a fire that wasn't real. You survived a basement in the dark. You survived men who wanted to erase you. And you're still standing here, trying to catch a fish. I wiped a smudge of dirt off his cheek. You are stronger than I ever was at your age. You didn't need a gun to survive, Evan. You just needed to hold on. He looked at me, his eyes wide, searching my face for the truth. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, I repeated. We cast the line again. This time, it flew true, landing with a soft plip in the water. We stood there in silence as the stars came out, a father and a son standing on the edge of the world. The ghosts of the war, the memories of the garage, the shadow of Victor, they were all still there, somewhere in the dark. But they weren't in charge anymore. I wasn't the Reaper tonight. I was just Adrian. And for the first time in 20 years, that was enough. Story finished. Where are you watching from right now? Is it morning, night, or somewhere in between? Drop your city and country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And here is a question for you. If you found out someone you trusted had silently betrayed you to protect you, could you ever forgive them? Or is trust like a mirror? Once broken, it's just broken? Let me know your honest thoughts below. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please gently hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more of these dark, emotional journeys to you. Tell me in the comments, what kind of story do you want next? Do you want more military revenge thrillers? Or maybe something about family secrets and courtroom justice? I read every comment, and I'll write the next epic story based on what you want. Until then, stay safe, watch your six, and I'll see you in the next one.